Good evening to all. Welcome to the SDG Dialogue, and we are Aparna and Pallavi, and we are students of MSW at Amity University, Noida. We have with us today two guest speakers, Ms. Supriya and Ms. Preet, for a conversation on changing dynamics of gender presented by the Changemakers Foundation. I would request Professor Mr. Prashant Chauhan, sir, to welcome our guests. Sir, please.
Aparna, and uh, and welcome to all the panelists. We have very nice panel today and very important topic, very pertinent topic. As we all the viewers, those who are watching us on YouTube and different platforms. So this is the initiative which we are doing for the SDG awareness, UN Sustainable Development Goals, and various webinars and series of dialogues are being organized on various goals, and primarily it is gender equality goal number 5, goal number 6, and goal number 13. We believe that being a social work faculty and students, this is our primary responsibility, that we all should work together for the achievement of the SDG goals 2030. And as we all know that this is a decade of delivery, we are in 2021, and till 2030, India has to achieve, and globally it has to be achieved. So we are trying to convey a message to all, and we are trying to have a word of awareness among people of different communities through online initiatives and through offline initiatives. And in this, today we have very important and very relevant participants and the panelists, where I am looking after the a very fruitful session today, especially Ms. Supriya from UNDP Northeastern region, because this session is very important because the situation of women and the initiatives of UNDP in the Northeastern region. So what is going on there? She would like will hear from her, and after that we have very young and dynamic Teet Shah from Nepal. So she's also alumni and MSW from Amity University. So looking forward to her great participation, that what she's doing. And definitely program is organized by youth for the youth. So Youth for SDGs is a kind of campaign we are doing it. So looking forward for a great session. And those who are watching us, please, you can give your comments. You can write your questions in the chat section, in the comment section, and then we will have a good discussion also at the end. So thank you so much, and congratulations to Aparna and Pallavi for organizing this very important session. And looking forward, and this is at the last, I want to say that this is very important month actually. We are where International Women's Day is coming on 8th, and this is a week for that. And after that, this is a social work month also. So being a social work department, I think this is very important for all of us, that 16th March is a World Social Work Day. So we are having this kind of discussions in social work month. So I think this is wonderful. And thank you so much, Aparna. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. So moving on, our first speaker is Ms. Supriya. Supriya has obtained her BA in Political Science from Lady Shri Ram College, University of Delhi, and an MSc in Social Policy and Development Studies from London School of Economics and Political Science, United Kingdom. Supriya is a development specialist from Assam. She is currently working with the United Nations Development Programme as a project officer for Sustainable Development Goals based planning and livelihood promotions for the 8 northeastern states in India. Supriya has worked both both at the policy front and the project implementation on cross-sectional issues, including agriculture, livelihood promotion, gender, entrepreneurship, and environmental protection. She has also founded an NGO and social enterprise focusing on poverty reduction, livelihood diversification, and organic farming. Her past experiences include working at UNESCO, Oxfam India, Bloom Microventures Vietnam. She has won two international leadership awards for her work in northeastern India. She has also represented India to international conferences such as World Youth Summit of 350.org. She has trained and worked with multiple organizations on SDG training. She has also contributed to academic journals and editorials on SDGs. Welcome, Supriya. Would you please enlighten us with your journey?
Hi, a very good evening to everyone, and thank you so much for having me in this conversation. It's really, really exciting that we have these spaces where young people and academia, everybody, all the stakeholders can come together and have an open sort of a dialogue. Um, I feel the word enlightenment is a long journey. So the journey to enlightenment is definitely long, and we are in the process. But so far, my work in this space has been inspired, I guess, from a very long time. Growing up in spaces where you see a lot of things that raises questions, right? Like since you're a child, you see all of these things which are considered social norms, and seeing those norms, you start questioning who has developed this, what is the genesis of it, why do we act or behave in a certain way, why are women treated in a certain way. So my journey towards even the in working in the development sector has actually risen from that fact. Why do I have a better education versus others don't have, or why do I have access to better healthcare when others don't? I feel these are some very, very critical questions when you're growing up as a child. You see it around you. Sometimes we are slightly blind to it. Sometimes we realize that we have certain privileges that have allowed us to be in a position that we can make that change or we can have an impact. So yeah, my journey so far, I feel it's just starting and it's a long, long way. But I've been really, really privileged to be able to work with. In the past, I've worked with a lot of women entrepreneurs, women engaged in agriculture, and we know we usually when we think about agriculture and we think of farming, we do not think women in the forefront of that. And we have created, although they are the backbone of the Indian economy, we still kind of don't have that face to the work yet. Also, I have been working with UNDP in the policy front. And when you come to policy, especially policy regarding sustainability on SDGs, it's really, really important that governments in India, both state and centrally, adopt the SDGs as not just as a policy priority, because um, our resources, as we know, are it's not infinite. We have to be able to cater and create rules and policies that have that protect our natural resources. So, and why is this important for gender equality? Because again, women, when we are participating in any sort of workforce participation or even in our own households, I feel women are the key stakeholders for nature preservation. Women are the key stakeholders for ensuring long term sustainability for our very limited resources. So I feel SDGs is much beyond Goal 5. Goal 5 is critical, but it is again integrated to achievement of all of the 17 SDGs. So it is right at the center. It is not exclusive. It is right at the center of all of the goals. You cannot achieve any of the goals without having Goal 5 as center of it. And I'm sure the audience here today are aware of the SDGs, so I don't think we'll go deep into what do we mean when we say how are they thing, but we can come out with some of the main sort of issues that are critical for maybe for Northeast in my case. Aparna, over to you.
So, ma'am, would you please talk about the changes that have been coming up in the society after coming of the SDGs as compared to earlier in reference to special reference to Northeast?
Okay, that's a so the SDG process per se has started since 2015, And before that, although the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, were 8 goals, and they did put a lot of emphasis on prosperity per se, but they did not focus so much on environment and sustainability. So, since the SDGs have come up, which focuses equally on economic, social, and environment, I feel the onus and the participation of women in the policy space has increased. Number one, it has allowed people to have conversations which are cross sectoral, because again, achieving any goal by itself is not possible. So whenever there have been these engagements, for instance, I can give the example for, say, the government of Assam, that whenever government of Assam was drafting its vision document, it didn't just sit with one stakeholder. It engaged a lot of stakeholders, including civil society, academia, and experts, youth, to be able to come into one platform and have that discussion. And this was for all goals, but then again for all goals, but then it was specific, that in the sense that there were thematic experts also participating. So that's sort of a space where organizations could come and bring their voices. I think SDGs has allowed that. When we speak about the process of localizing of SDGs, I think that is where it impacts women the most. Whenever we are taking any of our activities now around the globe, actually, people are talking about leaving no one behind, which is that first we should work with people who have been the furthest, like the hardest reaching areas, hardest reaching population. That's where our focus should be. That's where you start from, and then you work backwards. So that is another sort of a tool that SDG kind of gives you, which otherwise is wasn't there. The third thing I would say is that SDGs are not just for developing or developed countries; it's for everyone. So I feel that, so in the policy sense, like MDGs were very like top down, and that is why it was also difficult for them to actually permeate and like kind of spread and everybody to adopt it. Here in SDGs are not like that. They are supposed to be equal for all countries. It's everybody is responsible for their achievement, and states are kind of prioritizing their own goals. So, for instance, states are developing their own priority goals, priority indicators. They're creating their own indicator frameworks, their own monitoring systems, which are then curated to their conditions, which is again using their population and being able to decipher what is important for them. Whereas if something is being top down, then it wouldn't be as appropriate and as relevant. So I think these are some of the critical things that SDGs has brought about. In terms of women participation, whenever there is more dialogue, I think there is more women participation. This is since it has created that space for coming forward and having those dialogues, it has also created space for women to be more actively participating. Aparna?
So, ma'am, like the topic we have today is the changing dynamics of gender. So, how would you talk about it, like the changing dynamics of gender in respect to the northeast of India? Because the northeast of India is not so much always highlighted. So, how would we present that?
Could you repeat the question again? I'm sorry, I missed a little bit.
So, the topic for today is the changing dynamics of gender. So, how has the gender changed throughout the time? Like, not the gender has changed, but the meaning of the term has evolved over the time. Like, the spaces have evolved, and like talking about the freedom.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I feel again, gender is a huge term. So specifying how it has evolved for my perception would be difficult to say. But then most of you are aware how Northeast has evolved in its own kind of space. Northeast was extremely conflict-ridden space. There were conflicts literally in almost. There was a lot of violence in a lot of places, and women's role in the peace building process has been actually one of the critical pieces which has never been openly discussed. Like, I don't feel that has been a part of open debates, and how women actually have played such an important role in the peace building process. This is not, some of it is organized, but some of it has been indirectly influenced, with women coming together and bringing forward their voices to create peace in their communities. um, I feel that has played a huge role in how gender is being evolved in this part of the country. I feel women are obviously the backbone of all of the work that is happening in the progress and progress that is happening. Unfortunately, there are a few areas that needs a lot of input. I think Preet would be really happy to work here. Women's participation in political spaces is extremely low in most states. So that is a huge challenge that needs to be overcome. In certain states, we have absolute minimal participation in political space in the grassroots as well. And these are, some of them are traditional systems, and some are, there's just not enough scope or opportunity for women to come forward and participate. So that is one of the big backdrops. But the other thing, most people, whenever people think of Northeast, they think violence and crime and violence against women and discrimination is lower in Northeast. But in a comparative basis, maybe it is, but actually it is not. In terms of violence against women, there is quite a lot of evidence that the violence against women, especially in the hilly states and also in Assam, is extremely high. Women's workforce participation is actually higher in certain states like Mizoram, Meghalaya, and Manipur, but otherwise, the social sort of participation in the open space and in public spaces is much lower in those states. So it's again evolving. I would feel women are now, in the last maybe 5 years or so, women are rising as entrepreneurs and taking over the space. There are a lot of MSMEs in Northeast which are led by women across the Northeast. So that is one space that women are upcoming and taking forward. But then again, if we don't create that political engagement, I feel there is always going to be a backdrop if women are not leading and deciding on the policy front.
Thank you, Ms. Supriya. Now, welcoming our next speaker, Ms. Preet Shah, who has completed a master's in social work from Amity University and began her career in Nepal in the field of empowering women in entertainment sector, as known widely as women working in the commercial sex sector for over 5 years. So simultaneously, she worked on becoming an early childhood development specialist to also gain experience to work for child protection. So she believes in solidarity of women coming together, and her involvement since past 7 years has been with women for all walks of life. In her journey of activism, she's been able to explore advocacy through theaters. She has been part of organizing teams of the vaginal monologue since 2015. Inclined towards creative engagement, writing, and poetry as form of advocacy, Preet encourages the younger generation to explore these mediums. Currently, she's working in a project that primarily works for women in politics, as engagement in the political decision of women falls weak in Nepal despite the encouraging participation and quota. The project is focused on capacitating elected women in the far west of Nepal, which almost covers 5 districts. So, ma'am, could you start with your presentation?
Hi. Thank you so much, Pallavi, for the lovely introduction. And also, I'd like to say thank you to Prashant sir for giving me this platform. And also thank you, Supriya, for giving such a. I think I understood more now in terms of like SDG goals, but I think I'm just gonna start with just adding to what Pallavi said. I started this. I studied psychology when I was in undergrad in college, and I think that sort of enabled me to understand and be capacitated enough to really take in what the reality of the world is, to understand it better. So hence I shifted my studies to social work, to be able to be more engaged in what the society has to offer around us. Fortunately, when I was studying my masters, we got to do a lot of practical engagement, and during that I worked with this organization called Salam Balak Trust, which showed me what why this whole women and children, the vulnerability, and what causes the damage that it causes. Just before I start off with my presentation, I'd like to just say to Pallavi that I'm just going to go through the guidance of whatever you've given me, and if there's anything I've missed out, just text me or call out to me if I miss out something, because I'm just going to go through the questions. So to begin with, just like Supriya said, for me it is, and I think although gender equality is a global issue, it starts from home for most of us, and it starts because it envelops us. This whole concept of um, why being a woman, or why being of a caste that is of minority, why are these things creating a barrier in terms of freedom? And when I say freedom, it's an actual and otherwise as well, because I think that is something while growing up, for me, it was, I kept questioning why was I not allowed to do so many things, whereas the men around me in the society was, and I had no space to question it. And when I grew up, if I hadn't seen all of that, I wouldn't be able to have the bandwidth as an adult to forcefully advocate for not only certain issues that I face or people around me face, but everybody faces. And I started understanding that if we take this up as a feminist, we're able to not only create a space for ourselves but for the coming generation in terms of leadership. If we don't create that space for the children, then they're not going to grow up to becoming adults who can take up advocacy very seriously. So in this journey, like Pallavi mentioned, I started with working with commercial sex workers, adult entertainment sector, women working in that sector, and slowly I engaged in trying to be a early child specialist, but more so in terms of child protection. And now, after 6 years, I have had the opportunity to be able to work with women in politics. It hasn't been so long, but it has been a very fruitful journey for me. I'm still learning. There's so much to learn. Um, the work that I do right now is primarily focusing in far west Nepal. And why do I emphasize this? Is because it is in a very rural place. You know, it is not a very, you cannot access it very easily, even in terms of geography. So, while Nepal has a lot of boastful achievements when it comes to political participation for women, and credit goes to the feminists way back. If they hadn't worked hard, if they hadn't challenged their own freedom, we wouldn't have been here. So of course, like, because of their work, we are now able to. Now we're almost in the parliament. Not only is it 33, but now because of the SDG 5, we're aiming to have almost 40% of participation. However, although it is a boastful achievement, in Nepal, a classic example I would like to give is that during the pandemic, when we had the committee for coronavirus, for the pandemic committee, emergency committee, there were only men. So there was no representation of women there. Um, for example, the mothers, the men would make decisions about what do they need in terms of nutrition, or what would they need if, in terms of, in quarantine spaces, maybe you heard about so many violence happening there, but there was no women to talk about that, and that is because of the lack of space. Similarly, um, when it's just a token system, if you're just representing a certain level in policy making, then you are not able to achieve what your goal is. In terms of, even let's say, SDG, SDG goals are not going to be met if your local government isn't capacitated, and if they're not, it's not going to, you're not going to meet the goal if your own government is weak, and your government is going to be weak if there is a lack of representation of women, which we face all the time. Similarly, in terms of freedom, I'd like to say recently there was a law that was proposed, which was of course ridiculous, because it talked about it was a mindless policy, because the policy said that to protect women to not be trafficked, women under 40 would have to take permission to travel outside the country, and the permission would be given by family, and if married, the husband. In itself, that is a problematic patriarchal notion, because who decides who is going to be able to, how can you decide that the family is going to be taking care of the woman? Maybe they are the threat themselves. So these are the kind of policy, this hasn't been passed, but if these kind of policies are made, then it itself hinders the freedom of women, because it's a blanket approach. Similarly, I would like to talk about how, in terms of like freedom and men and women, and why these dynamic of gender comes up, no longer is the family, as a family is not no longer just a role, or a simple role of a mother or a father. In terms of partners, everything has changed in the modern society, and I think we fail to recognize that. But however, if we really do analyze and read the researches, we see that uh, there are micro level of conversations that happens between partners, and then the macro level structures of political sphere and economical sphere in your own society sort of changes that. So as you can see, women's participation in the labor market is increasing. However, it's disproportionate the care that they have to show in the house. So even if your dynamic and gender roles are changing, you see there's a vast disproportionate when it comes to what a woman is taking up. And if through researches, you'll see that most part-time jobs are only women centric. And there's still a wage, in terms of pay gap, because women are considered to be weaker in the labor market, and that is because of the disproportionate, they are being economically empowered, but then they also have still a lot of pressure on them. So I think in terms of gender dynamics changing, we can see it a lot in our urban setting, but when we have to really look at the rural setting in terms of work and how, a classic example is the work. I'll even show you a small photo story that I prepared. I mean, with Pallavi, thank you. Which talks about, okay, yeah, we can see this first. Thank you, Pallavi. I don't know if you were all able to read that, but I'm just gonna tell you a summary of this and why I thought this would be nice to show, because these are all women from far west Nepal, from a place called Badura. Many people within Nepal would not have been able to reach that place because it is in a very, very remote place. Um, so these women, they've probably not studied, but they've studied life, and that in itself is what makes them unique. And these women are all ward representatives, so they're women in politics. They're elected women, and they represent their own parties, and they we all got together in one place for leadership training, because even if they've crossed their 40s or if they're in their 50s, this is something that no one has ever told them about, and because there's a quota, they're there. So um to bring you back in terms of gender dynamics and how this has changed, even in a small place like this, what you see is, um just because there's a quota, it does make a difference. They are able to still stand up, they are being visible, and it uplifts them to have voices. So it does make a difference for sure. um However, when it comes to representation of making decision making, we lack there still in Nepal, definitely. And even in the urban city or in the rural city, it is something that we still need to work really hard on. Moving on to this question that Pallavi has asked me. Any suggestions that need to be made by the society for gender equality? I think this was an interesting question, which got me thinking, because as a feminist, fighting the patriarchal norms seems it's exhausting and it's tiring. I'm sure in different spheres of our life we've all faced that. However, I think one of the most imperative suggestion that I would make is a cultural shift, because as Supriya mentioned in the beginning, also in terms of social norms and why we do not question it, and is mainly because of our own privilege. I think we don't question our privilege enough, and cultural shift is something that is needed to understand how to adapt in the modern society, to be able to not only educate our girls but also the men, and how this should not even be a problem. I think one of our main goals should be that this should not be something that we need to address in the next 50 years. So yeah, that's it. If I missed out something, Pallavi, please let me know.
Oh, ma'am, I think you've covered almost all the areas. So, if there is any questions from our participants who are there, I just check for the
Yeah.
question.
So I think before that, I would like to also, understand something from Supriya and Preet actually. So Supriya, I think you very well explained, and I think I appreciate that what work you people are doing there. My concern is this, that I am looking back 10 years, so every year I see that a lot of social work students and development studies students come from northeastern region actually, and they are somehow very much engaged in various aspects of in development sector, especially working for various things in that area. The purpose for this session actually, if you see the gender aspect actually, so I just want to know from you that what are the special things, as a role of UNDP, especially because when we say goals, then they are your goals actually, they are given by UN actually, and that everyone is working on. So, like, there are various agencies now, NGOs are there are government agencies, there my various programs are going on. So, in terms of when I see the achievement rate, so do you have anything that you can just highlight that in what at what level we are now, and what are the areas of weaknesses where we should work upon? And if you have anything on the transgenders perspective also, I think, so if you can just add that perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel the SDGs were drafted, facilitated by the UN, but it was drafted, co-drafted by a lot of stakeholders. So UN is the facilitator in this process. Although in Northeast, for instance, as I had mentioned earlier, in certain aspects, yes, we're doing well. But there are other aspects that we are not doing well. So I'll just highlight a few of those. So, for instance, health is one of the critical areas that we are still lagging behind. We are, especially because of Preet also mentioned about how remote her space that she is working in is, and that obviously affects and disenfranchises women more because it leads to, obviously there is higher infant mortality, maternal mortality rates in a lot of the states in Northeast. So that is one of the critical challenges that we need to target and we need to work towards. The second being a very big one being education, and that is why you have a lot of students who are going to other parts of the country to study. And in certain, actually pre-COVID times, now that's a trend change that is happening now. A lot of people wouldn't come back. Now there is a change in mindset. There is a change of people being able to create enterprises themselves, startups themselves, using social media and other sort of channels that would help them to grow their businesses individually. But there are also a huge margin, especially women who have been affected by it during COVID, who have come back to Northeast. Northeast has huge influx of people coming who were working outside who have come back. And these women, again, most of them actually, UNDP has been working in very remote parts of Assam as COVID economic and social response. And I, in fact, have met so many women who are single mothers who have come back, who were working somewhere and then have come back and now do not have jobs to support their families and also are not being able to go back to their earlier jobs. So economic incentive is huge one. We are working a lot on skills and livelihoods. Government of India is also working a lot on skilling and creating livelihoods. But there are a lot of issues that especially women face when we are working in workspaces. Workspaces in general are not designed for women to be engaged in. Very few spaces have creches, few spaces have, just mention anything. I don't think most of the offices or even work sites or any of these training centers also would have spaces for younger women or youth to be actually fully engaged in. We are still talking about access to toilets, but forget separate for women. But we are still talking about access to toilets. But these issues are being addressed gradually. There is a long way to go. Infrastructure wise, I feel that's the drawback in Northeast, that it's a huge space, spatially spread, and hence, and in certain parts the population is also very sparse, and hence reaching the most remote places gets difficult. But we are making gradual steps. UN has been working, UNDP has been working in the COVID response activities, especially with people who have moved back from different parts of the country. There is a lot of discussion now happening with more inclusion. So SDGs obviously are talking about inclusion in all spaces, and LGBTIQ community is one of the biggest excluded groups in the previous sort of policy frameworks that have happened. I feel this is where there have been a lot of discussions on it, but now it's mostly time for action. I feel the time for discussion is over. If we don't have these discussions if we don't engage with these people in these sort of spaces, then it is not ever going to come forward. I feel also, just adding to earlier to Preet's point, you had made a very valid point, and I feel there's a sense of entitlement that we feel that men have. It is not so much about, everybody would know, it's not about men versus women. Feminism actually is about freeing men more. It allows, when there is more feminist spaces, it actually leads to happier families, happier workspaces, happier economies, better economies. If you compare any of those statistics across the world, you will see that spaces where there is more equality leads to more happiness index. So I feel those sort of things should, those conversations still have not happened here, and we need to kind of work towards that. Yeah, Prashant, that's it from my
Yeah.
side for now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I think that's very important, because if I see that, a lot of efforts are going on, very rightly said, and especially Government of India is especially stressing on northeastern states. A lot of programs are there, and a lot of agencies are working, and especially you are placed there, and you are also looking after specific that region. So it looks like that. And obviously, it's not about only goals. Actually, goals are one. I see that it's a kind of way, which is a direction which is being given. But I think we all have to work together, and especially when I see that in this session. So I think youth's role is also very important, because if I see gender equality, or if I see goal number 6 or 13 or any goal 4, so every goal is somehow integrated to each other, and we can't expect a better India, or a better place in the world that we can work upon. So now I'm moving to Nepal, Preet Shah, because I know that the similar thing, we have a lot of alumni from Nepal, and I think Nepal and India have a lot of similar situations, and in terms of especially for women actually. Many things I see, and a lot of migration internal is also transnational, for jobs, for education is also one of the aspects. So Preet, I'm watching you on social media. We're not much spoken, but yeah, I know that you are into all this. So Preet, as per your, around 8 7 8 years you have done your masters, and you're working in this sector. So when I see the SDG goals, number one question, so when you see these through the SDG lens, Nepal, so either it's a gender equality goal, or any other goal. So what do you think that in terms of awareness level is there? And especially the status of women, actually, when we talk about representation in politics, or in as an entrepreneur, or various other things. So how you are taking, seeing this, increasing, and what are the challenges you have observed, or what are the areas where needs to be done?
Thank you, sir. So first, I'll just would like to explain, like not explain, but I'd like to just talk about. I think when we just talk about women representing in politics, I think the basic, unfortunately, um, we lack the basic literacy of even understanding the constitution and the legal procedure in itself when we talk about women. And this is primarily because, again, everything is connected, right? And in their home front, when there is this onset burden on them, where we have the disproportionate work is given to them, then economically they're not sound and they're not independent. And when that happens, you in itself, you don't have that self-esteem and confidence, because it's not built in to them for their upliftment. Which is why, in the work that I'm doing right now, we also have this really important aspect where we talk about entrepreneurship for them. And money, women and finance. One thing is just ingrained in us, to uh, unfortunately, a lot of us don't even understand the worth. So you tend to sort of be okay with what you're given, and finances, especially women, and that has happened here widely, where you are it's become a norm to depend on your partner, your spouse, or your parents, and your economic dependency is not given a push. So which is why this giving seed money, giving them making them understand something in terms of microfinance, why is it important in their field. In terms of SDG goals, at least in SDG 5, I think in Nepal, not only are we looking at this represented here, but also there are a lot of challenges, like polygamy in itself is something that Nepal faces widely, and child marriage, which I know India also struggles with similar issues, at least in child marriage, and that is also something the government has been working on. It is addressed, but very centrally. So, in terms of grassroots politics and politics around the rural areas, it isn't. It is in central level, yes. I mean, a lot of intergenerational, like you said, the youth intergenerational dialogues is something that is given a lot of importance these days, at least in the past few years, to understand where or leaders or people who've led movements, where do they stand, where does the current generation stand, and how can we learn from each other's experiences, is something that is definitely going on in the central level.
Great, great, great. So yeah, so I think there is one Satyavrat Shukla. He's a MA Development Studies student. So he's pointing out two, questions that as per the data, 85% of rural women are engaged in agriculture, but only 13% own land actually. So this is one aspect, and most of them are still recognized as workers in the informal sector. On the other hand, if you see the political representation in the PRIs, so you will find that there are women pradhans in Gram Panchayats, but they are just for the sake of on for their that pradhan prati is working more, but they are just representing as a pradhan. So in these two aspects, who would like to answer? Any one of you, Supriya or Preet? Supriya, I think you can answer this if you want to add something on this.
Yeah, sure. I would like to say that there has to be a huge structural shift. Um, we are aware of the challenges. Women are, if you just look at, we just brought up suffrage movement, the struggle that our women in the past, our previous generations have done, and because it didn't affect us directly, I think in India we didn't understand how much women had to fight for their rights to vote. That by itself kind of signifies how difficult the entire process has been. Um, these structural changes, for which comes to inheritance, land, power dynamics, are huge. On paper, yes, we are doing most of the agricultural work. We are actually leading most of the enterprises. We are the backbone of most of the micro enterprises. Yet, in the long sense, yes, women do not have that voice and that participation in the ownership. There are, in this we need to have, obviously the structural reforms, the policy reforms are primary. Otherwise there is not going to be, if there is, the shift is not going to happen. And second is that we need to be able to make people aware of their rights. There was a really without being able to understand what you are capable of, like Preet mentioned about the constitution per se, that we don't know, the women are not aware of what constitutionally you are entitled to, then you would not be questioning it. And with decades of subservience, of saying yes to yes, I think there has been unfortunately, women have not been given that space to question. It is time for it is women in pockets have are creating that space and are going forward and questioning these rules and norms and societal norms. These are human constructed norms, but women are questioning it, and we need to be able to encourage that. That is where we will be able to bring that change. um, we also know, I think the Pradhan question, Preet could take that, but there was another question on the psychosocial support in the comment section. QNDP, while we realized that there were so many people coming back, we did a lot of work on the psychosocial support for migrant workers once they got back. Because honestly speaking, when this whole thing, because COVID is still ongoing, and the impacts of this is going to be has been much harder on women. Women have had more violence than ever before in the lockdown period in India. Women have the number of reporting of cases has gone up substantially. So the need for also psychosocial support, be able to have that support to be, voice what is going on, has gone up substantially. And this has also been a backdrop for the work that has been happening in gender in the last few years, because it has shot up. Um, it is really important to also have very good psychosocial support mechanisms. Otherwise, it is extreme. Without that network, without that community, it is extremely difficult to go forward when you're facing some of these issues. So yeah, that's all from my side for now.
Yeah, thank you. I think you very rightly answered what was asked. So I think in the Pradhan thing, I just want to add before Pete will speak that what I've seen in India that obviously, as you Supriya said, that a lot of struggle is there. If you see the history, so women representation is not something which which we are currently seeing. Is like it's 1 or 2 decades. It's like centuries that women are facing a lot of issues, a lot of trouble, problems at various levels. So now when government has given that especially in the 73rd amendment in India, that will be a reservation in the PRI elections, and then afterwards women got the chance. So there are examples where women are doing great work. Actually, they are coming forward, they are contesting elections, and they are, but somehow there are cases where these things also we have seen that the men are just family members are representing because it's a women's seat, or something quota is there, so they are bound that, so they are just putting the name for the sake of name, they are putting it. But I think for that also lot of changes are happening. It's not like earlier. Women are quite confident. They are coming forward. Educated women are also joining politics, even at the panchayat level, and things are changing. But definitely, this is one area where a lot of efforts are required, and this is not one thing where we can work easily. I think there's a constant efforts are required in this sector, and I think education is one part also. So the especially in the rural women, when we see that the education level, so I think that also is one of the hindrance of participation when we are talking about representation in the political platforms. So, in this, if Preet wants to add something, what is the context in Nepal in terms of women representation in Gram Pradhan or something? So, please add.
Hmm. Um, no, I don't think we have that kind of system here in terms of Pradhan, but I do understand it because I remember going to Jaipur when I was in Amity, and we did I understood the whole concept there, and even then I still remember the lady kept glancing at her husband, to make sure that what she's saying is right. Although because that is again lack of self-esteem and confidence. And while adding to this, I think, a lot of people, and I saw these comments where we're saying, like, how are we going to empower women in the rural fronts? And, how can we get past this sort of hindrances and obstacles? Education, rightly said by Prashant sir, that it is, of course, going to be a big obstacle. But now, what we can do is formulate like a curriculum of sorts where you can do political literacy. You don't have to do literacy in itself as an education, but sort of give them that space to understand basic things which we are taught probably in college, like communications, public speaking, um, in terms of behavioral science. These are like really basic things for us perhaps, or for them it is a big change. It makes a big huge difference in their lives because they're able to bring out their voice. The participation of solidarity can only happen if they speak, and if they're allowed to give that space. And if they're not given that space, they need to take that space, and they won't be able to take that space if they're not given political literacy at all. We cannot sit them down and teach them ABCD now. Now what we can do is tell them, hey, these are your rights. This is what the constitution says. You need to challenge it. Maybe things won't be different now, but for the women coming after you, it is going to be something. So I think this has worked for us so far, where we reiterate consistently that things are probably not going to change in your term right now for the next 2 years, but it is going to change for all the potential leaders that are going to come up. So I think that is one sort of way to tackle it.
Very nice. I think very correct. And I'm just adding here that if we see that people, comment that a lot of issues are there, but recently under this campaign only, so 2, 3 students organized one very, rural outskirts one session, and the name of session was Know Your Rights. So that was also linked with the this Gender Equality 5. So in that we have seen that the girls which were in school actually and other people, they're quite very active as we have some notion that okay, rural girls women are not so much aware, but we have seen that because of social media, because of television reach, and because of smartphones these days. So we were doing the live on the YouTube, so girls were asking, see, is it live? I will just go home and I will tell my family that you can see me on the YouTube. So I think a lot of changes are coming up, and things have changed. But on the other hand, contrary, when you see the newspaper, you will find the one girl is raped, harassed, or something like that. So this is also a contrary situation. So in that, I think a lot of things to be work upon. I think Supriya wants to say something. Yeah.
Yeah. Two things to add to this. Number one, if we don't make our public spaces safe, women don't come forward. Because, like you said, cases of violence are still on the rise, it's not going down. So, number one, for women to actively participate in political spaces, our public spaces have to be safe. Number two, women's understanding on their social protection, like what are the measures that they have to be able to protect, as a guarantee towards what they are working for. And number two, another point would be the economic incentive. Like if we are enabling women to be independent in their economic sphere, I think that dependence with, looking at towards someone for a validation would reduce gradually. So these are the three extra points I wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I think there is one another, Pradeepta Rana wants to know that please elaborate a bit more on the challenges that are faced by women in terms of political participation, and what other methods, other than the quota system, can make this participation more organic, actually. So, in this, if you have anything to add. Yeah. So, I think I want to start with this. Yeah, Supriya, please.
I feel I'm not sure of your thing, but I would feel that all of us, all the women, we need more women leaders to see in that space. The more women we see, the more it's basic kind of psychology, I guess. But when we see ourselves that they are young people who are occupying that space, I feel there would be more people actually coming forward. And that's the challenge, because it takes a lot to kind of come out of the normal system. And it takes a lot of courage as well to be able to go against everything that is happening and then go forward on that. Preet would have wonderful case studies on that, on how women are going forward and overcoming those challenges. But I feel the more we see, and we need to change our the idols we have through movies, all of that, because those that kind of detracts a lot. But then I feel, yeah, we can create those idols itself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think Supriya, you rightly said about the we need more women leaders. Just to add to this, for Pradipta's question, you know, this is not funny anymore, but if you all have noticed, when we are younger and when we're going through our college, and when we're having our little breaks, space where we talk about politics is usually dominated by men. We don't just sit and talk about politics over tea. That is not something that women do. That is not something that we were encouraged to do as children, as young adults, when we were young. And I think that is where one problem starts. When we are getting educated, used to be, at least we used to be ingrained to think politics is dirty. Politics is not something for women. It's a lot of fight, and a lot of women are not even aware in general. It's not only about the representation that we have in the ward and the municipalities, but in general, in the conversations we lack that. and, and another important thing is when we're doing social movements, even at least social workers and feminists who are advocating understand, when we stand up for something, when we do social movements and campaigns, and we work on movements, there's so many times we say, oh, we're apolitical. We're not going to take a political stand. We're politically neutral. And for a long time, that was a sort of trend, because we started becoming comfortable with the fact of dividing the social movement with the political movement. What we consistently forgot is that a social movement requires a political stand in order to get a result in most cases. So I think while we talk about quota system, which has definitely helped, I agree. But if it is like she said, Supriya talked about structural shift. That structural shift is only possible if we start from a level where children are being groomed to be an adult. And for that, we need the curriculum to be set in where women are encouraged to talk about politics, be aware, be politically literate. And I think that is one way of also, moving past this hindrance of
Yeah.
representation.
Correct. And I think, MSW student Shaurya Garg is saying that what steps can we take to inculcate the idea of men for women in our society, as it is crucial that men also stand up for the women empowerment. So I think, being a man in the panel, so I think this is very important, because if women will talk about only, then things will not change actually. So we have a cohesiveness should be in the society, and both are on the parallel, and they are interdependent actually. So I think in that way men should be aware, and a National Commission for Women India has started this thing, that Man for Women initiative also, that it's not about that women leaders should talk about for their rights. So men should also, and then only we can see the society where everyone is happy and have equal spaces. So in this way, this is very important. So Gautam Sharma is saying that agree with Preet 100%, very dynamic. So very nice. So people, if you have any questions, you can just post it quickly because we are at the end of the session. So there is a one another thing which Soni Kumari is saying, that during pandemic everyone has helped people in terms of everything, but post pandemic we have to help them to come out from the pandemic trauma. So what initiatives we can take as an individual? I think she's talking about the women perspective, because we have seen that especially the migrant women workers face a lot of issues, and so in that way a lot of schemes and efforts are being implemented by various people, various NGOs and the government side also. So this is great. So I think this is the objective, that it's not about talking, it should be into action. So I believe that these sessions are somehow helpful, where we are getting perspective of different parts, not in India but globally. From Nepal also Preet spoke very nicely, and she tried to share about what initiatives are happening there. But I think somehow, if we see the all the Asian countries, so somehow status of women is not very much having difference in how, because there are a lot of levels where we have a lot of similarities. So obviously there's a long way to go, and everyone has to work on that. And gender is not only women, one more thing. So we have to see in that perspective also, that we have to work in a manner where we are working for everyone, for every section of the society, and we have to take care of them. And small efforts, small initiatives, if a small bit of a step, I think has have very important role, and small steps change the situation. So I think in this way, what the students group of volunteers, youth is doing, especially now, this is very appreciating, that because they are the one, who is going to take forward all these things what we are talking about at every level, when they are going to join any organization, or they are into politics. So what Preet is saying, that it's not only, Preet, about that women are not talking about politics. I'm just adding in that youth, actually. If you see now, if anyone says that I want to join politics, then people say, oh, you want to join politics? What happens to you? You must think of some government jobs, or maybe private sector, or this and that. So that kind of situation, that we have. So especially women are obviously the main thing. And if you know that Gulabi Gang, that movie is also there. So we will be having one session with them also very soon. So that lady is going to speak on this platform in the SDG Dialogue series. So most in coming weeks, we will be having her also. So she started that Gulabi Gang for the women representation at the grassroots level. So I think there are, and especially the media, politics, a lot of success stories, case studies, role models are there, which needs to be addressed. So very nice and wonderful. I'm very happy that Supriya is also representing UNDP in a great manner there. So anything you want to add in the closing remarks, both of you, please?
Thank
Any
you so much.
message? Yeah.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I feel like the education starts at home, but it also starts. It starts with men. I feel today's discussion, we spoke a lot about what to do for the empowerment of women, but actually we need to first start educating men and our boys on what is equality, and then the paradigm shift will definitely happen. Like I said earlier, I think the stereotypical gender rules that we play is also affecting the men in our society. We are not enabling men to also reach their full potential emotionally, physically, otherwise, the expectations are very different. When we speak of gender, we need to speak about all our the LGBTIQ community, our the men, women, and others, because I feel the issues are way more complex. but only if we start that education and that reform, I think we will all be in a much happier space. Thank you.
Yeah, Preet, any closing remarks?
Um, Firstly, thank you so much, Prashant sir and Pallavi, Aparna, and especially Supriya. Thank you so much. And just to wrap up the whole the session, I think it's time that we start working on blurring boundaries and not be too bounded by all of these social norms that we've been subjected to. It's important to find that fluid, how we can submerge into different sort of gender roles. Acceptance is going to be key, and I think yeah, just basically try and blur the boundaries in every way possible. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And I think uh, uh, I'm looking forward that the Supriya, Preet, and all the the future people, those who are going to speak on this platform, and those who already spoke. So I'm looking forward that we will have a group of network, and we will work together, whatever possible, and we will be in touch. And the movement which is started by the students, by youth, I think it will go on and on. And the mission and the vision of this definitely will we will achieve. And uh, at whatever level, it's not about that one person can do what. It's, I think, whatever any person can do, that person must do their bit. And this is the way actually we want from youth, especially youth community, for the sustainable development goals especially. So in this way we can think of a better society. So in this way, thank you so much for coming and joining on this platform and having your views. And Preet, I'm looking forward to work on the Nepal also, that we will work together, because on this goal. So very soon I will speak to you, and let's have joined hand together, not in India, not in Nepal, wherever we can work, we should work together, have network
Yes.
of people together, and we will
Absolutely.
collaborate. Pallavi is there, a lot of other students are there, they are passing out this year. So you can have a group of team there so that you can take forward this momentum. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for encouraging.
Thank you, sir. So I'd just like to conclude as we are at the end of our webinar. I would like to say that it gives me immense pleasure to deliver the vote of thanks for this webinar to our distinguished guest speaker, Ms. Supriya and Ms. Preet, for gracing today's webinar, for your thoughtful, provoking, and interesting points regarding gender. I'd also like to express our deepest gratitude to our supervisor, Mr. Prashant sir, for giving this platform to address such an important issue, and also for your guidance and moral support. And I would also like to thank all the students and the participants who have been there with us through the webinar for today. Thank you all.
Chaliye, thank you so much, and
Thanks,
and
sir.
see
Thank
you
you.
next time. Supriya, bye. Thank you.